world, Krista here with Books and Jams, and today it is time for my third and final wrap-up of the Book a Day challenge that I gave myself for middle grade March. I did not quite make it to 31 books, but my total number was 29, which is pretty stinking good if you ask me. I kind of lost some steam towards the end of the month, which is to be expected when you're completing a book every single day. Today I'm going to go over books 21 to 29 with you and tell you what I thought about them, and then tomorrow I will be posting my complete wrap-up from middle grade March. So let's just jump right into the books that I completed in the third third of the month. Book 21 was The One and Only Ivan by Catherine Applegate. Catherine Applegate has become one of my favorite children's book authors this month. I loved The Wish Tree, and The One and Only Ivan came so highly recommended by so many people, and it won a Newbery Medal. I loved it. So this story is from the perspective of Ivan, who is a gorilla that lives in this mall that is kind of like a zoo inside of the mall. So he has been caged for most of his life. He does have some memories of before living in the mall, and he becomes friends with a little dog and the elephants. And this story is quite heartwarming, as Catherine Applegate does so well, and was just such a lovely read. I really enjoyed this one. The next one I did not enjoy as much as most of the others this month, and that was Orphan Island by Laurel Snyder. I had high hopes for this because the premise is that there are these 9 children who live on this island, and we don't really know why they live there, but every year a new child comes, a new very young child, and the oldest gets on that same boat and leaves the island. So there's a new elder child that is kind of in charge, and it seems like they've been on this, that this has been happening for quite a few years. The problem I had with this book is that it got a little bit repetitive. It didn't get as much into the surviving aspect of it as I would hope, and none of the questions that I had were answered. It didn't answer really anything, and I found that to be very frustrating. I don't mind ending a book with a few questions, but when you don't tell me the reasons for anything, I didn't like it at all. And spoiler alert, it turns out this whole thing is kind of an allegory about childhood and having to eventually grow up. So I was super disappointed in that aspect of it. Not at all what I was hoping for or expecting from this book. Bummer. The next one I completed, I listened to mostly on audiobook, and that was Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. I did not like this one as much as I liked Inside Out and Back Again, which was another book written in verse. So this one is written in verse. But I did think it was very cool to hear the author, Jacqueline Woodson, is the narrator on the audiobook. However, I found her voice to be very soothing and very slow, so I sped it up quite a bit. I don't know if I was already starting to lose some steam, but I just didn't connect with it as much. However, it's her memoir, so it's autobiography memoir of her recounting a lot of stories from her childhood. She lived both in the north in Ohio with her father's family, and then her mother's family is from South Carolina, I believe. So she talks about the 2 different cultures that she grew up in as an African-American girl in the 1960s, I believe. Just different trains of thought about civil rights. She talks about religious aspects. Her mother's family raised her and her siblings as Jehovah's Witness, so she talks a lot about that and what that was like, both in school and in their meetings. There was a lot of aspects of this that I really liked. It just wasn't a home run for me as I had hoped it might be. The next book I completed was the one for my Goodreads read-along book club called Books and Jams Readalong. In March we read Jane Steele by Lindsay Fay. This is sort of a Jane Eyre retelling, but not exactly. It doesn't follow Jane Eyre's story completely, but there are elements of Jane Steele's life which reflect Jane Eyre. But she also refers quite a bit to Jane Eyre in her story throughout the telling of this narrative. Jane Steele is ultimately a serial killer. She ends up killing multiple people in this book, but the way that it's written and the way that we learn about each of these situations, there's a lot of morally gray areas, and I love that. I kind of root for her in this book, which I would never ultimately root for somebody who's killing other people in real life, but I was totally rooting for Jane Steele. I wanted her to have love. I wanted her to find home. I wanted her to find acceptance, and that is always a little bit fun for me because in reality, I'm not going to be gung-ho for somebody who has murdered multiple people. So this was just a fun ride. I loved Lindsay Faye's writing. I was very captivated by the story right away. There's a lot of history of the Punjab and India, and I got a little bit lost in some of that history. I wasn't quite sure what was going on. So that, I think, is the only reason I didn't give this 5 stars. I think I did give it 4 stars, though I really enjoyed it overall. The next 2 are also from my TBR from the beginning of the month. The next was Howl's Moving Castle. This is the one I picked for my adaptation, and I did just return the video today. So I finished this book and then watched the movie, which was kind of fun because the movie is, would you call it anime? I have never seen an anime movie like that before, so it was very interesting. Lots of differences, obviously, from the book to the movie, which always happens, but I think because I read it and then watched it back to back, I didn't enjoy the movie as I might have if there had been some space in between. But this is the story of a young girl who is cursed at the very beginning of the book to become an old woman. So she runs away from home and ends up finding Howl, the wizard Howl, in his moving castle and kind of making herself at home in the castle as the cleaning woman. And it's just her learning to accept herself. It's a fun story, and I'm really glad that I read it. I'm glad that I watched the movie too, but I liked the book, obviously, much better than the movie. Oh, then I completed The Girl Who Drank the Moon 20 minutes before Katie and I had our live Insta story, our live Instagram chat about this book. I was sliding right in there by finishing this book so soon before that conversation, which ended up being so good, even with all the technical difficulties that we had. I'm so thankful for those of you who joined in that Instagram live that we did. This book, The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill, is definitely one of my favorites from the month. If you're not aware, The Girl Who Drank the Moon is the story of this town who once a year sacrifices their youngest baby to the witch who lives in the woods, thinking that they are protecting their town. But we come to find out very quickly that the witch who lives in the woods doesn't understand why a baby is being left in the woods every year, and she takes these babies to other cities to be adopted, and on the way, on that journey to the free cities, she feeds them starlight. However, one year, she accidentally feeds the baby moonlight and magics her. She gives the baby magic and decides to keep the baby, names her Luna, just keeps her as part of her own family, thinking that she can teach her about her magic, and just falls in love with this baby ultimately. But this book is so much more than that story. There, first of all, is a swamp monster named Glurk, a tiny, tiny dragon, a perfectly tiny dragon who thinks that he is simply enormous, and just some wonderful, quirky characters. This book deals with forgiveness and sorrow and loss and love and hope, and is so incredibly beautifully written. I loved this book so much, and I'm so glad that I own it because I will read it again. I think everybody should read it, and I'm so thankful for the conversations that we had on that Instagram live because it was so good. After that, that was on a Wednesday, right? So I had like 4 more days of the month, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I had 4 more days of the month, and I was already a little bit behind. So I read just a real quick Beverly Cleary. This was a childhood favorite. I think I read all of Beverly Cleary's multiple times. So I dove back into Ellen Tebbits. This is one of Katie from Life Between Words' favorite ones from when she was little. It was very nostalgic and sweet about this little girl named Ellen who kind of gets herself into trouble, misunderstands the people that are around her. It's just a cute story. Then I completed The Secret Hum of a Daisy by Tracey Halter, and this was a book that was sent to me by Lisa from Books and Smiles. Thank you again so much, Lisa. This book deals with grief. again, I love books that portray grief because it comes in so many different forms and looks so different for so many different people. But the story is about a young girl named Grace who lived with her mom, but her and her mom moved all over California every few years. So she's grown up her whole life, never really connecting to anyone else, was very, very close to her mom, and then her mom passes away. And she is sent to live with her grandmother, who she never really knew other than from the story of how her mom was sent away as a pregnant teenager. So she has a lot of prejudice against her grandmother and wants to go live in the last place she lived with her mom, but she learns that things aren't always what they seem. She learns to open up her heart, and she learns what home really means and discovers a new home and a place to belong. This story was beautiful and heartwarming. It wasn't as maybe powerful as some of the other books I've read this month, but it was still a very beautiful story and I loved it. The final book that I read for middle grade March, I listened to on audiobook, and that is Prince Caspian by C.S. Lewis. I am making my way through the Chronicles of Narnia in 2018 on audiobook. And I enjoyed this one. I think I discovered that I don't love battle scenes in books, and a good chunk of this book is a huge battle for Narnia, and I just kind of zoned out a little bit. Maybe because it was the 29th book that I've read this month, and maybe because of the battle scene, and maybe because it was on audio and I was tired and have been dealing with a lot of back pain this month. I don't know what the reason is, but I didn't love this as much as I remember loving all the Chronicles of Narnia, but it was still very good, and I love that Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy are back in Narnia. I love Aslan. I love the Chronicles of Narnia, so they all will always hold a special place in my heart, but this one wasn't my favorite this time around. So there are the 9 books that I read during the end of March. I would love to chat with you about any of these books. There are some doozies in here that made me cry. There are some that made me laugh, and overall I'm just very, very pleased with how my month went. So I'd love to chat with you down in the comments about any of these or any of your favorite books that you read this month. Give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will be coming at you tomorrow with my official wrap up for middle grade March. So I look forward to chatting with you very soon. Bye.